Hello, today we're going to take a look at the Fostex 380s Multitracker. It's a 4-channel tape recorder from the 90s. I think it was one of their better ones, and it actually sounds really good, but it has a really annoying problem, and I know that there are more people out there with the same issue. So I'm going to try to document that here and present my way of repairing it. I have pre-recorded all the video clips of me fixing it and tearing it down, taking it apart. So I'm just trying to overdub and explain what I've done to that. So let's go. So here we have loaded the tape. We turn it on. We press play, and when you press stop, this happens. The head panel just does not engage or disengage properly, and suddenly it just ends up with an error. You have to turn it off. When you turn it back on again, you have to use a screwdriver to push the head panel back down again. And it eats tapes, and it's not very fun to have to deal with every time you press stop, obviously. So we're going to take things apart here. Take away all the knobs, take away about 10 screws, and then we're going to lift the lid off the machine, unplug first a little grounding cable there. It's easy to forget about it. It's quite tight, but you remove that very easily. It's just pinched on there. And then you remove a flat cable, which is the connection from the button section to the actual device. So here we have the actual problem. This section should bounce back to the bottom automatically, and it doesn't. We have to remove that whole white plastic section, and to do that we have to remove one little plastic thing, one left and one right. And be careful to not lose the screws, they're very small. Also, when you remove this little part with the pinch roller, be careful to understand how this goes back together after. That spring is very important. We're going to come back to that when we put it back together. Then we have to remove the transport section from the case. It's easy. You remove 4 screws, 1 in each corner. Just be careful not to lose the screws inside the machine. So I recommend using a screwdriver with a magnetic tip. Then everything is loose, and we can sort of lift it up. It's still connected with cable, so you can't take it out of the machine completely, but it's loose enough. And we needed to do that to be able to get the whole section backwards. Otherwise it would hit the display when you try to remove that part. It's very simple, and we're going to look at the issue here. That spring is the actual problem. That's a broken spring. That is supposed to push or force that little metal pin backwards. And since the spring is broken, there's nothing that forces it backwards to the bottom position. So we have to fix that. We're going to create a new spring. So that's the broken part. I also found the part that broke off inside the machine. So we have to get a new spring like this. If you look at the exploded view in the service manual, you will see this part. It's the part number 33. It's called head. Now it's called spring head panel. If you also look at the same view in the Fostex 280 Multitracker service manual, you will see that it looks very similar. It's numbered part number 28 here that I marked. It looks exactly the same. It's also called spring head panel. Of course, this spring is not possible to purchase from Fostex or any other place online that I could find, at least. So I took some measurements and figured I would make my own. So I found a site called Conrad that has one in the right size. It's 0.8 millimeters thick spring string. It's made for creating springs. So I took some measurements. Also need to figure out what the inside diameter of that spring is. It turned out to be 8 millimeters or something like that. So I found an old screwdriver that had about the same diameter, so I could use that as a mandrel. Turns out it was actually quite hard to do that with just using my hands. So I figured I would actually head down to the garage and my really crappy looking vise and use a pair of pliers to do this instead. It's a pretty simple spring. It's just a one lap around. So human power is enough. I didn't need to get any other kind of motorized gear to do this. Just measure again to make sure that it turned out to be the right diameter. And it was, so that's good. And then we just need to cut the ends so they have the right length. And there, we just need to test that it does have some tension, and it does. Let's put it back in the machine. So it goes over that metal pin, and then one end has to get stuck under a little metal, I don't know what you call it, but it's supposed to be making it stay in place, so it can be used as a spring on the other end. And we have to make sure everything is aligned before we can put it back together. It was a little bit fiddly here, but you have to kind of align everything up, and the metal plate has to be has to have the right position, but also catch that little spring part that we just created on the underside. And yeah, a bit fiddly, but it's not really hard. You just have to be careful. And there you go. And that's when it's back together, and it seems to have some tension, right? Here's a view from the top instead, and it does seem to have a healthy tension, which is good. So let's put it back together. Here's a little interesting part. That spring that is underneath the pinch roller part has to be going behind the black plastic part that has to be screwed back from the top there. Yeah, it's you have to use. It seems like you need to use 3 hands, but apparently it works with 2. You just have to be careful and do it step by step. So you have to force that little end of the spring so it's behind the black part. Otherwise, the pinch roller will not be able to push back in its back position. There we go. Seems to work. And it follows the head panel there. And then we just have to put the transport section back into the case by fastening the 4 screws. And then we put the lid back on. So first we put the flat cable back, and then we have to put the grounding cable back. And there we go. Let's test it. So we power it back on, put a tape in, and press play. And yeah, there we go. Stop disengages the panel section, and it does not eat tape anymore. Now, there can be another issue with your machine. If you open it up and you find that the spring is not broken, it could be another issue. The little thing here that is marked on the picture is a little connection that could be oxidized. You might have to fix that, clean it off with some sort of very fine sandpaper or some, I don't know, cleaning chemical for electronic gear. There is actually another user on YouTube called Third Island that made a video on this on a Fostex 280, which he calls the crazy operations defect and repair. So you might want to check that out, and he will show you how to take care of that problem. But personally, I am now going to enjoy recording some old school acid house onto tape and being able to press stop. Thanks for watching.